Friends, Lord, just give us yourself. Just give us some time with you. Bless you, Jesus. Amen. So we're in a time, it's Grok, it's AI, the way people are using it. It's the famous files that are amazing simply because they show a reality that was going on and everybody knew it and sort of just, whatever. And it's in the church. We're in a time when, like in 2020, when the racial issues that always had been there were, the cover was pulled back and they were revealed in their depth for a brief time. We were willing to look at that. We're in that time in our society regarding attitudes and actions and prejudices and behaviors towards women. And there's a story in our movement, unfortunately, of a bishop who ordained a man who had a criminal record of going for a prostitute. I forget the proper verb that's in the criminal record, and felt he had a conversion. Not saying he didn't. I never met him, and became a priest. The bishop didn't tell the church where he went anything about the guy's history. They had a woman deacon. He has a meeting with the woman deacon one-on-one, and he comes on to her. And she doesn't feel comfortable, so she calls the bishop. And what she took away from the meeting with the bishop was that the bishop said, "Hey, no problem. I will pray for you and forgive you for being in the room alone with him." True story. Tonight, some of this is heavy. I mean, that's heavy. The Jesus part of this is like, wow, not heavy. It's like so beautiful, so beautiful. But some of this is heavy. How does Jesus see a woman? What does Jesus understand a woman to be? Well, we've been taking these few weeks, and we've been taking the brilliant insight of Romano Guardini, this Catholic theologian, that in the Gospel of John, which is the more mystical of all the Gospels, when Jesus uses the word woman as an address, that there's something that happens that births the church. Now, to be clear, just a quick thing here, we don't have time to chase it down. Guardini thinks that particularly applies with Mary, and it does, but I think the principle can be expanded. I could explain that, but we don't have time for that, and maybe I'm wrong anyway, but it works tonight. So we're rolling with it. So Jesus is being, argued with by the Pharisees and the scribes and so on. And they send these people to argue with him. This is the end of chapter 7. And these people come back and they say, "How'd it go?" And these people that they sent say, "Well, I don't know. Nobody's ever talked like him before." And they blow up on him, right? They go, "What's wrong with you?" And then they say, they get reduced to what they really are. They give up on reason. And they get reduced to what they really are. And they say, "Are you from Galilee too?" They just go straight, they just go to the level of their prejudice. Because reason hasn't worked, so they go straight to the level of their prejudice. Jesus, then, after this little thing, they have gone over here and argued amongst themselves. He's gone to the garden. Of course he has. He's gone to the garden where he went. Jesus, the second Adam, has gone to the home of the first Adam, the garden. The place we humans, being made of God, breath, and earth stuff, the place that's home for us. Jesus has gone home to rest up, catch his breath. And then early the next morning, because he's on a roll and he's in a perfectly right way taking it to them, he's taking the goodness of himself to the people, and he's taking the clarity of truth to the leaders who don't want to hear it. He gets up, and at dawn, he goes to the temple. And they, who are trying to get him, they reload, and they are now reduced to evil. No pretense. Well, I take that back. They'll have lots of pretense, but they've given up on reason. That's passé now. And so they're reduced. They give up on their principles, and they go straight for expedience. We've seen a lot of this in the church in the past 10 years. And it's the same thing. The lenses we've seen in the church, in our society in the past 10 years are the lenses which help us read this gospel lesson. No exaggeration. These are the lenses watching this happen that have made this passage pop off the page for me in new ways. So Jesus goes to the temple, and we get one of these little details that matter. He sat down and began to teach them. This is a rabbi act by Jesus. He's claiming the authority to teach. He sits down. This is the beginning of the Sermon on the Mount, right? And he sat down and he opened his mouth and he began to speak. That's the beginning of the Sermon on the Mount. So he's sitting down. It's a rabbi moment. Jesus is claiming authority. He's going to sit down and teach. And then John is brilliant. He's just so brilliant the way he tells us. You got to read these carefully and slowly. They brought a woman. Do you hear it? They brought something. A woman. What's a woman to them? A woman to them is a device, right? It's a device for, this, that, and the other thing. I mean, not only that, but a woman is dangerous. In their mind, a woman is a dangerous device. And they bring this dangerous device. She's a device for pleasure. She's a device for children. She's a device for cooking or whatever. In this case, she's a device for cornering their enemy. They've made a plan. And they bring her and they stand her in the midst. Now, John is brilliant. There are two things he does to pay attention to in the language. One of them is in meso, which is Greek, but it sounds like Spanish. In the midst, right? You get that, right? It sounds like something we would understand. They stand her in the midst. I can't prove it, but I think it's like in Genesis when, we've messed up and the Lord God comes and we're in the midst of the garden and he's in the midst of the garden. I think it echoes back to it. It's a judgment scene anyway. For sure, it's a judgment scene. That's why they come and stand her in the midst, right? This is a courtroom kind of, instant courtroom moment. They come and they put her there and say, judge her. The heat system is agreeing with us. And John is brilliant. Pay attention to who stands, when, where, and how in this story, and you will see the brilliant things that John is doing. And then they do the thing that is in front of us every single day in our society now. They lie and pretend like they're telling the truth and expect everyone to pretend along. They get up and say completely disreputable things as if they are to be accepted as real, and they expect everyone to play along. It's a pretending game, and they expect everyone to pretend along. This is the stuff that Václav Havel says kills the soul. Václav Havel, the poet who was imprisoned by the Czech secret police so many times during the communist era, he's the one who carried the toothbrush around in his pocket because he knew he would be arrested again. Havel, who was elected president of Czechoslovakia and oversaw the Velvet Divorce, the one place in Eastern Europe where the two nations, Czechia and the Slovakia, separated and blessed each other, and there was no bloodshed. Havel wrote prophetically out of his overall Catholic inheritance in that time about the way that this pretending destroys the psyche and the soul. And it's when they pretend and everyone knows they're pretending and they know they're pretending and everyone else knows that everyone else knows that everyone is pretending and people still pretend along. I mean, survive that. Good luck. Survive that with your soul intact. Good luck. I mean, really. And that's what they do. They create a contest with Jesus that Jesus at least knows is fake. Jesus at least knows what's really going on. Will Jesus be coerced into pretending along with them, like so many, by their their implicit threat? Or will Jesus find a way to bring the truth into the situation that will then create what we used to call reality. So we're going to see, as we walk through this, we're going to see what the pretending game requires. We're going to see what truth requires. And we're going to see what a woman actually is. Not bad for driving through the snow for a few minutes. Thank you, Jesus and John. So, first of all, the way the game is played, the lie is hidden under a veneer of something real. We caught this woman in the act of adultery. I think maybe there was a man involved in the room. I don't know. Where is he? Does anybody know? I know where he is at this point. Does anybody else know where he is at this point? He's being wink, wink, nudge, nudged, slapped on the back, laughed with, having a drink. Ha, ha, ha. Good job, buddy. Thank you. Well done. Why? Because they set her up. Remember, they gave up. They said, we can't reason with him anymore. Nobody's ever talked like this. What are you, from Galilee too? They were reduced to the level of their prejudices. So they went and they made up a way to frame him, to corner, they framed her to make up a way to corner Jesus. They set the moment up so they could corner Jesus and lie and pretend like they're righteous. Sound familiar? Something we now have lenses for because we see it every day. The subheadings in the English Bible will call this story the woman caught in adultery. I think they ought to say the woman framed for, raped in, manipulated into adultery. We don't know which one it was. Manufactured consent? We don't know which one it was. John tells it in a way that makes clear to people with eyes to see that it's a put-up job. John tells it in a way that people on the bottom, on the underside, would have gotten. They would have seen it. They would have said, this is the respectable absurd playing out. And this woman, whatever really happened in the room, this woman is being used and set up. And they're wink, wink, nudge, nudging the guy who did it for them. Hey, would she's got a soft spot for you. Could you go do this for us so we can come corner Jesus with this? Because if Jesus does what they want, we'll come to that in a minute. Think about where he lands. We'll come back to that. We'll be there in a second. This is why the so-called leader of our nation dehumanizes so much. This is why it's a strategy. This is why the late night rants happen on social media, his social media. This is why he is making our nation over in his image. This is why he wants his name on everything, because that's the way the big leader thing is done. The controlling, take it over, everything in my image, my name on everything, my face in your face all the time. This is the way this game is played. If you're a 20-year-old male in our society, for half your life and for all of your life since you might have been noticing, you have had an incredibly toxic masculinity in your face every day. That's a simple fact. We're seeing the fruit of that, the rotten, poisonous fruit of that. It's not just that he's a toxic male who's never learned to self-regulate, who's full of hatred in his poisonous heart. It's not just that he's emotionally immature and undeveloped. It's also that the dehumanizing is necessary, is part of the game in order for him to achieve the vision he wants to achieve to make our nation so-called great. He is trying to get people to do exactly what the Pharisees and the others are trying to get Jesus to do that day. And he has sometimes succeeded. On January 6, 2021, he succeeded. He got them to do the same thing. He managed to get the mob to act. The question is, how do you get the mob to act? René Girard talked a lot about this. René Girard is absolutely brilliant Catholic, French, literary critic, anthropologist, philosopher. He wrote some genius books. Some of these neo-right people have tried to claim him for themselves because of some small bits of what he said. I'm only saying this just to let you know, when you see those headlines, just know they haven't read the rest. They don't know what they're talking about. They're trying to warp him out of his bigger message and turn him into someone that they can use as a lever because they're afraid of him, because he's right. And he's nailing it. I know you don't have context for that. I apologize. Ask me and I'll tell you. Rissi preached on this passage several years ago and used his stuff, and it was fantastic, and it was amazing. Here's the way the game works. If they can get Jesus to throw the first stone, the mob will follow. It's very hard to get people to throw the first stone. People might be angry, they might feel indignant, they might feel self-righteous, but who's going to be the one to be the first one to throw? And who's going to have that on their mind and on their conscience? But once the first one is in, the whole mob follows, and therefore the dehumanizing. If you want your personal police force to arrest 5-year-olds and 2-year-olds and absolutely just devastate people, you have to dehumanize those people to the point that their children aren't really children, human beings, they're just little ones of this problem. Right? The Nazis call them roaches. Same game. The dehumanizing is a tool towards the end. If Jesus throws the first stone, what happens to him? He is forever in their camp. He will never have freedom. His message is lost and compromised forever. And they know this. So they pompously and self-righteously put on the pretense, do the pretending, and they stand her in his midst, the midst of all of them and in front of him. And they say, "Tell us, teacher, what does the law say? What do you think?" Now, if I were Jesus, I would have replied in a completely snarky, unhelpful way, because I would have just been angry. And I would have said, "Oh, so now you care about my authority, do you? Because you're asking me what I think. Great, you finally called up there." But Jesus is too smart to even get stuck there. Do you ever notice this with Jesus? Somehow, even while Jesus is being immersed in all this horrible, ugly, manipulating, deceitful, pretense junk all the time, somehow he never takes the bait. Somehow he remains above it while still addressing it. I mean, he is just not only just genius, but he's also just heart level better in every way. He doesn't ignore the real issue. He doesn't act like it doesn't matter, but he never takes the bait. He doesn't argue with them on their own terms. He asks them another question. He does something like he does here. He does a profound symbolic act that gets to the real issue and undoes all of their, stuff. He's absolutely genius. And so because he cares actually about her, and because he cares about all the people watching, he doesn't take them on their own terms. He does something genius and brilliant. He doesn't answer. He doesn't respond. He bends down and he begins to write with his finger in the dirt. Now, if you think about it, you know what he was writing. Anybody want to guess? You've never heard this preached on before. Somebody knows. What's he writing? Oh, okay, wait. That's a good theory. I've never heard that one. That's possible. Peter thinks he's writing different sins. That might be. That reminds me of the little clip on social media several years ago where in Italy, these nuns set this thing up in their church during Lent where it was confessomatic, and you had to go to the little booth and you have to punch in the thing, right? Like, what's your sin? Press 1 for this and 2 for this. And so this guy goes and he does it, and the nuns are in the back with a mic, but nobody knows it. And, and he punches and nothing happens, and he punches and nothing happens, and he punches and nothing happens, and this voice comes out and says, "Oh, your sin is the sin of adultery, and you commit," and then the guy runs out of the room fleeing, and the nuns are like, "Woo," because anyway, it's good. Peter thinks that's this moment. It might be. That's a good one. I've always heard and I've always thought he's writing the 10 Commandments. Why? Because the 10 Commandments are written how? By the finger of God. And who is Jesus? He's God. So he bends down in the good earth and he bypasses all their garbage by going to the good earth that God created and called good and writing the 10 Commandments, which are pure and true, the law of God, which Jesus himself, being the Logos, inspired and wrote. And he is saying to them, I am so far past all of you, don't bring me a question about the law, buddy, I wrote it. And he's also setting the table to remind everyone that it's not only the male who's created in the image of God, but also the female. And that to be a human being is to be created of the good earth and the breath of God. And that the woman is that too. And he's gonna close that loop, but he's beginning already to hint at it. And they're extremely uncomfortable because they want to make everything breathless and they want to make everything angry and they want to argue. So they keep asking him while he's doing this. And then we get an interesting moment. Jesus stands up. And this is really interesting because it's an unusual verb for stand. And it actually is like stands up straight. It actually like straightens up. So he's bent down, he straightens up. He stands up straight. I mean, he does this a lot, I think. But this time we're told it specifically. And he answers them then. Let the one among you without sin be the one to throw the first stone. The first stone is the thing that's incredibly difficult to get somebody to do. They're trying to make him do it. He puts it back on them and gives them a criteria whereby someone would qualify to do that thing. Do you notice the detail about the order in which they begin to drift away? The oldest go first. Presumably the wisest is the idea. The ones who go, oops, he's done it again. We don't have an answer for that because we've all got something. They begin to drift away. He's back down there writing with his finger in the sand. He's on commandment number 6 now, and he's carrying on. Jesus knew his René Girard. He knew how hard it is to get somebody to throw the first stone. And what he went around doing, instead of dehumanizing people so that others could be the ones who jump on as the mob, he went around dignifying and asserting the dignified humanity of people so that no one would throw the first stone at them. He knows that she was used and trapped and that they've set this whole game up. He knows all of this. Jesus has indeed turned this moment when they stood her in their midst into a moment of judgment, hasn't he? Because who's being judged? They're being judged. And the older ones get it, and they start to drift away. And then you get this absolutely just beautiful moment. They're all gone. And what does John tell us? Jesus was left with the woman in the safest place she'd ever been in her life. And where is that? Standing in front of Jesus. She's left standing in front of Jesus. So then Jesus stands up. And the way you catch it, if you catch it, what John's doing with, who stands when and where and how, then you get it. Here comes the denouement. Man, I love this stuff. I got to talk about something else to get myself back together. I just love this stuff. The Gospels are amazing. I spent Monday morning with this passage. I could have run through a brick wall. Man, I was just so pumped up. I'm like, give me Jesus, but the real Jesus, the living Jesus, not the American Jesus, the living, actual Jesus. Jesus does three things. He says, woman. First word, woman, as an address in the Gospel of John. Jesus, by golly, he did put her in her place. But what is her place? Dignified human being, created in the image of God. And then he asked her a question. Why? In order to let her define her situation, and in order to sow a little bit of gumption into her, and in order to restore her to the community, because they hear her speak and define her situation. It's just so good. It's so, so good. Where are they? He asked her. Does no one condemn you? Right? So all the townspeople, they hear this. They get it. Jesus doesn't say, hey, everybody, look, no one condemns her. He asked, does no one condemn you? And they all go, oh, right, no one's condemning her. And she says, no, no one. She gets to name it for herself. And Jesus says, neither do I condemn you. And she's restored to the community, and a bit of gumption is sowed into her life. And then Jesus says, go and sin no more. And we read that, and it's like all the air goes out of the balloon, right? Oh, man, she was a problem after all. I don't think that's what's going on here. What's going on here is that Jesus is giving her the inner strength that the next time that jerk comes around and plays on her heart and wants to manipulate her, what is she going to say? Get out of my house. There's the door, buddy. Get out. She's going to remember forever the way she felt when she stood in front of Jesus. And he confirmed in her her dignity as a daughter of God and a full human being created in God's image. And she will be different from this time forward, and she will never be able to be preyed upon again. Which leads us to a quick note. I have learned from some of you, and I completely believe you, that you have been taught in your childhood or growing up in church or something, that in 2 Timothy 3:6, that you've been taught that that's about seductress women. The thing about the weak-willed women. Beware of, what does it actually say though? What does it actually say? Don't be like the men. Beware of the men who prey on weak-willed women. Who's the problem? That has been, if you've been taught that this is about seductress women, I mean, at a 1 + 1 = 2 level, someone has turned that thing upside down and warped it. Paul is saying, don't be like the men who know that they can bend her and use her and manipulate her because she's been hurt. Look out for those men. And what Jesus is doing is changing this woman from a woman who seems like may have been in that circumstance to a woman who will now have the inner personhood to never be in that circumstance again for completely positive reasons of her own inner wholeness. Amen? Oh, it's so, so, so good. The third thing is Jesus was telling the church to handle these kinds of things this way. Which means what? It means no blaming the victim. It means listen to the women. I mean, it means pretty simple stuff that doesn't often happen. It means no pretending. It means walk in the light. We were going to have our town hall this evening, talk about some of the challenges our movement is facing, has faced, has stuck itself into. And I think now what we're going to do is we're going to let this message sit with us for a little bit. We'll do that in a couple of weeks in the first weekend of Lent, which is a great time to do that kind of a thing. And we're just going to let this be a seed of its own that sits with us and lets us ask, how does Jesus want the church to treat women? What is a woman in the church? How does Jesus see a woman? Just let that sit with us for a little while. But first, tonight, just invite you to come to prayer. Can you just see yourself standing with Jesus? Can you see Jesus standing for you, with you, defending you? Can you see that? Can you see yourself standing in the safest place, the happiest place, the best place you could ever stand, and that is in front of Jesus?